the commanding officer of the Canadian Snowbirds, Lieutenant Colonel Mike French, there delivering an update on what's taken place. The cause of the crash, of course, at this early point, because it just happened yesterday, is still unknown. He reiterated that multiple times. He says that once the investigation starts, it'll be about 30 days before an initial report is delivered to them and to various people in the Canadian Armed Forces that will maybe lay out sort of a pathway that they're looking into, but that the investigation can take up to a year. I want to bring in now retired General Tom Lawson, who of course served as Chief of the Defence Staff from 2012 to 2015, to go through some of what we just heard from Lieutenant Colonel French. Hi, Mr. Lawson. Hi, General Lawson. Nice to see you. Thanks for making time for us. Wish it were under better circumstances. I wanted to start off with something that in particular jumped out at me, and that is the description that Lieutenant Colonel French gave of sort of those last moments and how little time Captain MacDougall would have had to make a decision to eject, and how little time there was, basically.
Yeah, that's right, Vashi. Colonel French made it very clear that this was just about the worst situation that a single-engine pilot, jet pilot, could face, and that is just after takeoff, you're just getting speed underway, and something happened. Now, Colonel French really isn't in a position to speculate. He needs to be absolutely right with all his information, but we can speculate a little bit as observers, and it looks very clearly like the pilot, Captain MacDougall, suffered a thrust loss at that point, that critical point, and then turned what speed he had into altitude to give him time to consider his next move, which most frequently, when you've experienced a thrust loss, will be an ejection, as we saw.
And what about what the investigation will entail? I was going over a little bit what we heard about the timeline, that it'll take about 30 days to even get an initial impression. What kinds of tools do investigators have at their disposal? What will they be doing to try and ascertain exactly what happened?
Right. So they'll, of course, get any video that's available, the ones online, but also others who were there. They'll interview anyone who saw the incident. Of course, we are very, very lucky and thankful that we have a survivor, the pilot, Captain MacDougall, who will be able to give the ins and outs of exactly what was happening from the time of the incident until the time of ejection. And they'll also be able to gather parts of the aircraft to find out. It's amazing what they've been able to draw from various pieces that are left of the aircraft. And they bring all of that together and get an idea, probably within a couple of weeks to a month, of what the likely cause was. And then they need to nail down every possibility outside of that. And also, the RCAF has one of the best flight safety systems in the world. They then need to wrap up with a list of the causes and contributions and contributors, and how, this is the most important part, come up with recommendations on how to avoid this same situation in the future. You
heard a number of questions directed at Colonel French around the future of the Snowbirds. He ascertained he wasn't in a position, as the commanding officer to talk about that. But certainly for D&D, there will be some questions, just given that there have been fatalities in the past and what happened now. What are your thoughts on I guess, an answer to those questions?
Well, it's so tragic and somewhat ironic, too, that it was during Operation Inspiration that this accident occurred. What the Snowbirds were doing was exactly what they do best. They were traveling across the country and raising the spirits of Canadians at a time when spirits are low. Now, normally their job is to travel from air show to air show and demonstrate professionalism of the Canadian Armed Forces. And so many of the members of the Canadian Armed Forces, Air Force for sure, but Army and Navy as well, will tell us that at some point during their career, during their childhood and teenagehood and adolescence, they saw the Snowbirds. So I really do think that display teams like this are so very important, not only to the Canadian Armed Forces and the health of their recruiting, but also to Canadians and the pride in their armed forces and the nation. You see the Skyhawks for the Army, a jumping team, showing the same sort of professionalism for the Army, and the Navy often will send ships in, not in formation, of course, but ships into port and allow Canadians to climb on them. These interactions are so very important.
And I should say that Colonel French also said that the Operation Inspiration, as you referenced, which was of course what these jets were taking part in, is suspended until further notice, and that the entire fleet of snowboard jets are on an operational pause. He also spoke to Captain Jenn Casey and sort of who she was and what she contributed. She was the public affairs officer for the fleet. She absolutely loved this job, was one of the quotes about her. Talked about how she was an inspiration. She was so active on social media and in such a positive way that he attributed much of the success of Operation Inspiration and it being so well received by the public to many of her actions. We've been hearing from her friends all day talking about what an amazing person she was. Can you talk a bit, General Lawson, about the impact of this combined with the tragedy just not long ago of what happened off the coast of Greece on the morale of forces right now, who, by the way, are not only expected to do their normal duties, but also in Ontario and Quebec in long-term care homes, helping to fight off this pandemic?
Yeah, we're talking about units and subunits and organizations as large as the RCAF and the Canadian Armed Forces, all of which are affected. I had the opportunity to speak to the head of the Air Force, General Meinsinger, today, and he's, of course, deeply affected by these last two accidents, and yet he spoke at some length about Captain Casey and her dedication and what she meant to the team. You know, if we go to the very lowest level, and that is the unit that we saw Colonel French speaking to today, and you could hear the emotion in his voice, it's a devastating blow. And I think we should probably recognize that it's even more devastating because we're not used to it anymore. Even 40 years ago, when I was starting my career, very unfortunately, we took these kind of hits, Army, Navy, but especially the Air Force, at great frequency, far different than today, when, although we thought we were very professional as pilots back then, the level of professionalism is just at another level, and the reliability to the aircraft that are being used at another level too, which is of course wonderful. But when these things take place, and especially when two of them take place, although unrelated in such a short period of time, it affects the entire RCAF and in such a way that it just rips the fabric a little bit. But of course, they'll survive and they'll come out stronger afterwards because they will investigate every input, every part of these accidents and become better for it.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much, General Lawson. Appreciate your time as always.
Thanks for having me, Vashi.
Retired General Tom Lawson, former Chief of Defense Staff. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.